Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
No one was in the room, so it was very shocking.
A Surrey woman calls for better care after she says ER doctors sent her home before miscarrying alone in hospital. Also,
if we have to do job action, we will be very strategic.
Stores closed, services shut down. What it could mean for you if one of BC's biggest union goes on strike. And
I feel hopeful that we have positivity and the hope, but also the grit and the intelligence to tackle this.
meet the climate changers, two young people setting out to upcycle imperfect produce.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening, I'm Lien Yeung. Thanks for joining us. A Surrey woman is speaking to CBC tonight about a traumatizing miscarriage at Surrey Memorial Hospital. Kirandeep Mangat says she went to the ER with severe pain while pregnant. Doctors sent her home. She ended up having a miscarriage in her hospital room. Our Kiran Singh spoke with her. Some very distressing details here. So, Kiran, what happened?
So Kirandeep Kaur Mangat is a 39-year-old Surrey resident, and when she was 4.5 months pregnant, she started experiencing some excruciating pains. This happened on May 12th, around 10:30 at night, when she was getting ready to go to bed. And after waiting for more than 2 hours at the emergency, she was seen by an emergency physician. He gave her morphine. When she was alone in her room, that's when she started to miscarry.
Pain was too much, and I was not even able to stand. I was suffering, and the nurses left, and then my husband was with me. We both were in the room, and I was crying with pain, suffering, and meanwhile the baby released.
Kirandeep says her husband repeatedly asked for help while she was miscarrying. She says they were alone in the room, having to handle the baby they suddenly lost. Typically, according to the health authority, when a person miscarries in the ER, they can seek counseling before leaving. Kirandeep says this was never offered.
What a difficult experience. So, Kiran, what was really supposed to happen throughout situations like this?
Yeah, so I wanted to understand the process better myself. So I reached out to Dr. Anthony Fong. He's an emergency physician with Vancouver Coastal Health. He also works at UBC's Department of Emergency Medicine.
Very often there is blood work, and very often there is an ultrasound involved. However, it varies as to the timing of those things and whether those things are, the importance of those things. The most important thing really in miscarriage is to make sure that there's no life-threatening bleed happening and that there are no other complications, such as an infection.
Fraser Health wouldn't speak specifically to Kirandeep's situation, but did say that they are looking into what happened and also apologized. When it comes to ultrasounds, they say are available in our hospitals 24/7 if a physician determines a person needs that level of care.
So Kirandeep and her husband obviously went through a very traumatic event. They're speaking out now. What is she hoping is going to happen from here?
She has been trying to get some answers from Fraser Health. Meanwhile, Fraser Health has told us that they are trying to resolve the issue directly with Kirandeep.
All right, thank you so much for that, Kiran. Kiran Singh reporting for us tonight.
Thanks, Leanne.
Police have released more details about that shooting that took place at the Wiliams Lake Stampede on Sunday. 33-year-old Jordell Anthony Sellers has been charged with attempted murder and discharging a firearm with intent to endanger life. He's accused of shooting and injuring 2 people at the annual event. Rosalie Montgomery was shot in the foot during the incident, which police say was targeted. Both victims were taken to hospital and are expected to survive. But the chief of the Wiliams Lake First Nation says the community is still angry about what happened.
Yeah, I get frustrated really quickly on this, and I look at, as a leader in the community, how do we heal as a community?
Yeah.
Not enough is being said about these incidents, and not enough is being done about these incidents. And it's going to be, a collective of Wiliams Lake standing up and speaking out against it to hopefully, raise the profile of it enough that we can, keep these individuals behind bars or get them the help they need so that this never happens again.
Jordell Sellers is expected to appear in Wiliams Lake Provincial Court on Monday. Vancouver Mayor Kennedy Stewart wants to see big changes to development in the city, more density in key places. It's called the Vancouver Plan and could become the municipality's first citywide plan. But as Justin McElroy reports, there's a lot of debate over how much it really matters.
It's a big picture plan with big picture videos with a lot of big ideas attached to it. It's the Vancouver Plan, and the mayor says it would be historic.
We've never had an official community plan.
Historically, the city has been planned neighborhood by neighborhood plans coming up once every few years. But the Vancouver Plan says, what if the entire city was planned like this at the exact same time?
Kennedy Stewart touts it as a way to break through the gridlock that meets every major development battle.
We need to bring certainty to the city. You can see the stress through the public hearings. You can see the stress through when you talk to the development community. More certainty is needed for everybody, and that's what this will bring.
The thought behind the Vancouver Plan is to enshrine what has been talked about for a long time, more density throughout the city, but especially on major transit routes. There's a catch, though. The plan doesn't actually change what can be built. That requires another level of approval, which would happen at the earliest next year.
So this is a necessary two-step process. I think COVID kind of delayed public consultation on it, so we had to make sure that we've got it right.
Though the mayor is aware that a big event could shake everything up.
It's called October 15th and an election. And to really go back and take a look about who has been, I think, focused on the priorities of this city and who hasn't been. And so that will be something that voters will decide in about 100 days.
Of course, different people can have different priorities, and there's a common saying about what can happen to the best laid plans. Justin McElroy, CBC News, Vancouver.
Negotiations have collapsed between the province and the BC General Employees Union, one of the largest unions in the province with tens of thousands of members, some of them firefighters, corrections officers, and liquor store employees. With job action looming, Michelle Gassoub takes a look at the potential impact.
The BC General Employees Union is one of the biggest in the province. Its members are liquor store employees, corrections officers, BC Wildfire Service firefighters, and more. And with negotiations with the province breaking down, job action could be coming.
If we have to do job action, we will be very strategic, very thoughtful. We want to maximize the impact to the employer, and we want to minimize impact to the public, of course, and to our members.
The union is negotiating in part for higher wages, arguing that with skyrocketing inflation, the current offer from the government adds up to a wage cut. The traditionally pro-union NDP now facing a delicate balancing act.
The NDP government, of course, has a situation where they're traditionally seen as a pro-labor government. Public sector unions in particular have been a really important part of their base, and they have been on record as saying that, these collective agreements should be negotiated.
95% of members voted in favor of strike action if needed. With so many of the jobs critical to people across the province, essential service levels would be maintained, including for the BC Wildfire Service.
Things that immediately impact or could detrimentally impact the safety, health, and welfare of the citizens would not be able to participate in job action. So that's why you don't see paramedics on strike.
The BCGEU also includes some healthcare workers and long-term care home workers. They're not included in this negotiation, but the sector says any future strike in those fields needs to be avoided.
There's so many fiscal pressures on the government that I really sympathize with them. But of course, people working at the front lines deserve to be well paid. So we just need to be prepared.
The last BCGEU strike was in 2012 and included picket lines of BC liquor stores. This time around, the union is hoping to avoid that by putting pressure on the province with a ban on overtime and other targeted actions. Michelle Gassoub, CBC News, Vancouver.
Home sales in the Greater Vancouver area dropped by about 35% last month. And as the real estate slowdown continues in Canada's most expensive cities, some prospective homebuyers say they feel more hopeful now than they have in years. CBC's Nisha Patel spoke to one couple in Toronto to find out why.
Kriti Bardwaj and Sachin Advani are hunting for a new home, and they've noticed a change in the market.
We were on the fence when the prices were going up, but now we do have hope.
The couple has been looking to buy for 2 years. Now they see opportunity.
There are more properties on the market. There are less number of buyers. It's not as competitive, as aggressive it was.
Sales in the Toronto area plunged 41% in June compared to a year ago. In the Vancouver area, sales slipped 35%. Smaller markets like Calgary have also pulled back.
So it looks like for the balance of the year, it will be slow. Interest rates are expected to go up again from what we've seen, and that will have an impact. Toronto
realtor Varun Mathur says the market is now more balanced, and that means sellers have to adjust their expectations.
We make it clear to the sellers that they're probably not going to get what their neighbors got a few months back. So a little bit of a reality check for sellers as well.
Toronto area prices have slumped 14% since February. Suburbs further from the city are also seeing big declines. In Cambridge, Ontario, the price of this home has been slashed by $200,000 since it was listed in March. In Waterloo, this house was listed for $799,000 in May. By June, it was reduced to $529,000.
Anything that's an hour plus out of the city, I think, is seeing the largest decline. I mean, arguably, they also went up the most. So I don't think it's unexpected. It shouldn't be unexpected.
This Vancouver realtor sees a similar trend playing out in BC as people who bought outside big cities rethink those decisions.
So now we're going to go through that correction phase. I think, the fastest pace of interest rate increases that we've seen in recent history is just exacerbating, I think, that turnaround.
In some markets, prices are still higher than they were a year ago, but with more interest rate hikes expected, experts say the slowdown is likely to continue. Nisha Patel, CBC News, Toronto.
The BC and Chilcotin governments have renewed their wildfire management agreement. It commits $250,000 a year over the next 5 years and puts Indigenous people at the forefront of managing these emergency services. Our Yasmin Gandov is live with us right now. So Yasmin, tell us what's actually different about this agreement.
Yes, Leanne, that's right. This is a 5-year renewal. And now the Chilcotin First Nation is looking for management of emergency services that directly is impacting their community. This includes training firefighters and relying on Indigenous fire management practices, as well as using culturally appropriate campsites. Chilcotin leaders say after the 2017 wildfire burned more than 500,000 hectares of land, today's agreement signals they will have more involvement and control in response and also prevention.
Everything's burnt. Nobody has better black trees than my community. Now it's time to replenish that. It's time to. And what that taught us is we have to be involved. We have to be involved in every aspect of resource management in our territory.
Well, it's been 5 years since that fire, and BC says it is committed to strategies that serve First Nations like the Chilcotin mitigate the threats of climate change.
The work that our government is doing with the Chilcotin National Government and communities will inform other Indigenous nations on how we should move forward. And in closing, I want to emphasize our commitment to improving overall emergency management in British Columbia and across Canada. And while doing this, we also are respecting Indigenous rights and creating new opportunities for shared decision-making.
The work is intended to help inform other Indigenous communities and mitigate the risk of wildfires.
All right, thank you so much, Yasmin Gandam, reporting live for us tonight. The landscape of the BC NDP leadership race has changed. No one has declared their interest in the top job, but one cabinet minister widely thought to have a good shot has said he is not running. BC Jobs and Economic Recovery Minister Ravi Kahlon made the announcement this morning. Mira Baines reports on his decision and who he's backing as BC's next premier.
But today I'm here to announce that I will not be seeking the leadership of the BC NDP. It's not the right time for my family and I.
NDP MLA and Jobs Minister Ravi Kahlon shocked political watchers by announcing he won't be running for party leader. It's been about a week since Premier John Horgan announced he will step down once a new leader is chosen, launching speculation about who will step forward.
I'm not able to make another 6-year commitment
to this job. And as a result, I've asked Darren Shumahetsa, the president of the BC NDP, to work with our governing body, the Provincial Council and the Executive, to select a date in the fall for a leadership convention.
The race had been shaping up as a contest between presumed frontrunners Callon and Attorney General David Eby. But Callon's announcement today changes that. He says he's now encouraging Eby to run.
He's delivered big things for this province already, and I think he would be an amazing premier. And I have already signaled to him that if he were choosing to run, I would support him 100%.
Eby has not yet jumped into the leadership race, but hasn't ruled it out, buying himself time to make a decision the day after Horgan announced he would step down.
For my own part, I remain focused on delivering for British Columbians. I'll obviously be having conversations with my family, with my friends and my colleagues, with the party and with British Columbians about how we move forward together.
While Eby is emerging as a heavy favorite, North Vancouver NDP MLA Bowen Ma is not planning to enter the race after saying as much on social media this afternoon. The names of other potential leadership hopefuls are Municipal Affairs Minister Nathan Cullen and former Tofino Mayor Josie Osborne, who is now Minister of Land, Water and Resource Stewardship. Whoever becomes NDP leader will lead the party into the next election, likely in 2024, and will be competing against Kevin Falcon, who took the helm of the BC Liberals in February. Mira Baines, CBC News, Vancouver.
The city of Port Coquitlam wants to make it harder for young people to buy spray paint and bear spray.
So this was brought about for a number of reasons. One, to deter youth from spray painting or carrying out graffiti within the community, to reduce the cost to the business community that are often the ones that will have to remove graffiti tags from their businesses, but also on various other properties and city infrastructure.
The city says it's seen an increase in graffiti complaints. There have been 35% more calls in 2022 compared with the same time in 2021, with properties, benches, bathrooms, and picnic areas often smeared with vulgar and racist comments. They've also received reports of minors using bear spray against one another on city property. Officials are hoping a proposed bylaw will deter the use of aerosols as a weapon. A new airline will be offering daily flights from Chilliwack, the first in more than a decade. Cascadia Air is expected to offer 7 flights a day from the Chilliwack Airport, flying to several BC cities like Vancouver, Pitt Meadows, Vernon, and others. The small commuter airline first began flying last November to help transport flood victims. A ceremony was held today to officially welcome the new airline. And meteorologist Johanna Wagstaffe joins us now. She's also a pilot. Joe, I didn't even know that Chilliwack had an airport. Shame on me.
Yes, it is quite impressive, and yeah, nice to see that they're continuing on the service.
Yeah.
It's, I would say, a decent flying day out today for small aircraft. You'd have to watch for some gusts. We're seeing winds around 40 kilometers per hour. Otherwise, a fresh afternoon after a muggy start to the day. Let me show you the temperatures out there right now. It was drizzly and cool, 19 right now at YVR, 22 out towards Abbotsford. And if you noticed a bit of humidity in the air, you would not be wrong with the humidex feeling more like 26 out towards the valley, 24 at YVR. So we're a touch below seasonal, but the air mass that's coming into us is coming in from the south. So that is bringing that mugginess, and there is a lot of moisture in our hood. We are not out of the woods when it comes to showers just yet. Those showers you're seeing on the radar moved in this afternoon. We get a bit of a break. That's what we're seeing right now with those blue skies. But the bigger picture is one more day of showers across the south coast, all thanks to this spinning low that's sticking around through Thursday and for part of Friday. That counterclockwise flow will continue to usher in that rain, and we'll really be watching for those downpours in the interior. I'll talk more about that and the eventual summer forecast, Lien. I do have a summer forecast coming up in a bit.
Okay, that sounds excellent. We'll chat in a bit. Thanks, Joe.
You're welcome.
How much food do you end up throwing out each month? As Canadians, we toss so much of it, we're one of the worst wasters in the world. After the break, we take a look at efforts to change that. Stay with us. And thanks for watching our commercial-free live stream. Just weeks after Toronto was selected as a host city for the 2026 World Cup, the cost of the games has already gone up. While some experts say the benefits will outweigh the costs, others question whether the millions that could be spent on other things. Jessica Ng has the details.
When France won the last FIFA World Cup, soccer fans packed into bars, filled parks and viewing spaces, and flooded the streets in celebration. You can bet there will be even more fanfare when Toronto hosts some of the matches in 2026. But just weeks after Toronto and Vancouver were named as Canadian host cities, a report to Council has increased projected costs by $10 million to a total of $300 million.
It's really hard for me to fathom that these costs would stay at the same level they are 4 years from now.
City staff tell CBC News the new cost estimate for the Games includes the recent rise in inflation, plus 10% more funds if needed.
So the question then becomes, is the return on investment going to yield the benefits that the city and the province and the federal government believe hosting this event will bring to the city?
The provincial and federal governments are expected to cover up to 2/3 or $184 million. Toronto will front up to $77 million for the matches, plus another $24 million in municipal services, including hiring 9 temp employees. The city will also host a more than month-long FIFA Fan Fest and expand BMO Field with at least 15,000 temporary seats.
The costs you can expect are going to be quite high, but at the same time, it really depends on what each individual country wants to achieve in terms of a legacy. You have to spend money to make money.
Settler, who has experience with marketing for soccer and CONCACAF, says making the games great will yield more place branding for the city.
In terms of potential immigration, in terms of foreign direct investment.
Like when Vancouver hosted the Winter Olympics, but advocates have similar worries as they did with the 2010 Games, namely that the money may be better spent elsewhere.
The housing sector could definitely benefit specifically from that $10 million. It will be, a great event in 4 years. However, we need to really take a deep look into how we spend that money.
Toronto's executive committee will vote to approve the additional funding next week. Jessica Ng, CBC News, Toronto.
When it comes to food waste, it usually means a hit to our wallets and a sense of guilt. But the impacts are much wider than that. About 8% of all greenhouse gases worldwide come from edible food waste. And the average Canadian throws out almost 400 kilograms of food a year, which makes us one of the top per capita food wasters in the world. Our Johanna Wagstaffe has been looking into ways to combat food waste. So, Jo, you actually found a pretty cool company out of East Van that's doing something about this.
I did, that's right. They're called PECO, and they're Vancouver's first peculiar and surplus produce delivery service. So at up to 40% off grocery store prices, this startup is hoping to save people a little money and hopefully inspire some bigger change. I joined co-founder Sang Lei at their warehouse on packing day. She even let me pack a box. Take a listen. They may not look perfect, but produce like these carrots could be key to solving the problem of food waste. Let's try and look at a box. Let's do it. So this is what's being packed today that will end up on people's doorsteps. I'm here at the Pecco packing facility where co-founder Sang Lei is going to show us around. Now, Sang, I'm sort of thinking that this is where odd fruits and vegetables find a home. Can you tell us where we are?
As you can see here, this is our packing line. Around us, we can see a lot of produce. So there are some organics and some conventional. And essentially what we do is we have a packing list, and then this list determines what goes into the box.
Inside these boxes are fruits and veggies considered either too weird or in too much surplus to be sold at your local grocer. Each week, it's a different variety pack of peculiar or Pecco produce. Should this box get an extra onion this week?
Let's do it.
These are gorgeous, though. So where would these carrots have come from?
They came from one of our suppliers. So we work currently with both wholesaler as well as farmer.
Grocery shoppers have the pick of the litter when it comes to produce. The nicest looking ones are likely to go first. That leaves less desirable products sitting longer, often destined for the landfill. Hairy carrots like this don't even make it to the produce aisle. Pecco's aim is to work with local farmers and wholesalers to get to that edible produce before it becomes waste.
If you're a farmer and you have ugly produce, you can maybe compost them or you can upcycle them right at your farm. But wholesalers don't quite have, I guess, the luxury to do that.
So it's finding the inefficiencies in the entire food chain, right?
Correct.
So these beautiful but hairy carrots are perfectly fine. Sang and her partner Ariel Locke, two business students, started Pecco as a passion project in May of 2020.
So we actually hit up every single farmer's market in Vancouver in summer 2021, talked to everyone there and asked them, oh, do you have any like ugly produce or any like surplus that you'd be willing to sell? And to our surprise, actually most of them say yes, because it's a win-win solution for them. And that's kind of how we got our first initial supplier.
To date, they say they've rescued more than 150,000 pounds of produce from the landfills. But they admit it's been a learning curve for the company on where the majority of waste actually comes from.
The majority of food going to waste is actually from surplus and supply and demand fluctuations. They become a little overripe overnight, or maybe have scratches or bruises. So that's the majority of food being waste, not the ugly looking one only.
One supplier at a time, one carrot at a time. But just how big is the global food waste problem? About 8% of all greenhouse gas emissions worldwide are the result of food waste. Significant CO2 emissions are generated during food production, the transportation of food, and when it does end up in the landfill, it produces methane, an even more powerful greenhouse gas. Do you feel hopeful that if enough people like you are doing these small but important moves that we can tackle the big picture?
The younger generation is the one that is going to live with the climate crisis 50 years from now. So I feel hopeful that we have positivity and the hope, but also the grit and the intelligence to tackle this in the right way.
And this story is part of our new series, The Climate Changers, where we'll be sharing with you the unique ways that individuals are taking action against climate change. So looking forward to sharing more.
Yeah, very cool. And then, you know, they've got a very interesting business. I really feel for all the misfit veggies.
So do I, yes. I have to admit I didn't before, but now I look at vegetables very differently on a grocery shop.
Yeah, and so much of those veggies that you showed us there, so much of it looks fine. It's, you know, like,
just a little misshapen. But you know, the question I had was, it seems like a small dent in such a big picture, a big problem. And I know there are a few other companies doing this, connecting surplus food items to customers, but how big of a dent is it actually making? So
yeah, when we're talking about the bigger picture of climate change, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's a huge problem, small dent, but I spoke to a food expert from SFU on what kind of a dent this can make. And she said that they're filling a gap right now in the food system, a gap that needs to be filled and that may always be there. But she said there is something that we can't lose sight of. Take a listen.
These types of, upcycling companies, value-added companies, they're playing an important role. Now, the only thing that I would say is it doesn't mean that we should stop talking about prevention. So that's the big thing that we also need to talk about is reduction is important, diversion is important, but at the end of the day, we need to make sure that we're not overproducing and not overconsuming.
Soma also said that one of the biggest things that companies like Petco can do is change the conversation about our relationship with food. And I think so many of us have lost sight of our relationship with food, where it comes from, how it gets to us, and companies like Petco can maybe have us reevaluate that relationship. And I think that's what's so important when we're thinking about solving not just climate change, but the issues of food security, food inequality, just thinking about where your food comes from.
Absolutely, just like the conversation you've raised and brought to us today. That was really great. Thank you so much for that, Johanna
You're welcome.
Wagstaffe. The leader of the Assembly of First Nations holds off, calls for her dismissal. What Roseanne Archibald did to maintain her leadership role. That's next.
In case the paint job doesn't give it away, this is the rolls the late Beetle bought in 1967. It's been on display at the BC Transportation Museum in Surrey for the past 2 years. Last November, as museum workers were cleaning the car, they came across something interesting under the seat, this film canister.
Perfect.
News of the discovery generated an international fuss. Could it be Lennon's? Who and what is on the film? But the museum kept the celluloid from an inquiring world while it tried to answer a few questions, not the least of which was,
is there any extra value in terms of that being someone famous?
But the museum's sleuths hit a brick wall. They still don't know much more about the film than when they started. So today they showed the film to the media, hoping that might generate a few clues.
This is the fellow that's in the apartment. Please turn on the This is the actual 8mm film that was found. This is not a duplicate, this is the actual piece.
Actual or not, Beatle fans amongst the assembled reporters were disappointed. Not a frame of Lennon. In fact, no one really knows who these people are.
The fellow is sucking on a rubber pipe of some sort. He's passing it to another fellow who's sucking on a rubber pipe. Please turn on the rubber.
We do know from this eclipse that the film was shot in Boston in March of 1970. One wonders if the filmmaker envisioned his work would be subject to such close scrutiny 29 years later. The museum has asked us to ask you, do you know any of these people? If not, the mystery of the Rolls film will in all likelihood remain a mystery.
Patrick Brown is lashing out at the Conservative Party over its decision to disqualify him from the federal leadership race. He says party officials are trying to improve Pierre Poilievre's chance of becoming leader. Brown's team said the decision is an indictment of the party and indicates that party officials are, quote, not serious about winning a general election. Marina von Stackelberg has more.
It's an egregious abuse of our democracy.
From his office as the mayor of Brampton, Ontario, Patrick Brown says the allegations against him are unfounded, that he's not aware of anyone in his camp who broke election rules.
We have no knowledge of this, and all we've heard from the party was there was an anonymous allegation that someone was working on our campaign but being paid by a corporation. We had 1,800 volunteers in our campaign around the country.
Brown says the Conservative Party wouldn't give him any names that would allow his team to investigate the claims. CBC News has learned there are allegations that at least one corporation paid some of Brown's campaign workers. The sources say the party's decision to disqualify Brown was based on verbal accusations, but also documents and financial records.
We must be the party that celebrates and supports religious freedom, not tramples it.
Brown is making his own claim that his disqualification is an attempt by the Conservative Party to smooth the path for his rival, Pierre Poilievre, to win the leadership.
The party establishment was nervous that Pierre Poilievre wasn't going to win. And his supporters, Pierre Poilievre's supporters, are the ones behind this disqualification.
A spokesperson for Poilievre has shot back, saying the accusations are credible, accusing Brown of trying to make himself out to be the victim. Fighting within the party could call into question its ability to govern, says this political strategist.
More transparency would be better. I think if folks can actually know what's going on, it would help remove any division or any questions that will kind of follow this story and linger for weeks.
Another leadership hopeful, Jean Charest, is also calling on the Conservative Party to provide more information about the allegations, saying that members deserve to know the truth. Conservative Party faithful will choose their new leader in just a little over 2 months. Marina von Stackelberg, CBC News, Ottawa.
A political victory tonight for the National Chief of the Assembly of First Nations, Roseanne Archibald. It appears she has defeated attempts to oust her at the annual gathering of the AFN. Olivia Stefanovich has that dramatic reversal and fresh concerns that the power struggle has dominated the agenda here in Vancouver.
A reversal of fortunes for Assembly of First Nations National Chief Roseanne Archibald.
Emergency Resolution 2 has been officially withdrawn by the mover and seconder.
The resolution to topple her from office abandoned.
She's the right person, I think, right now in leadership.
This chief says the AFN would have been left with a dark stain if it removed its first female national chief.
It would devastate the women of our communities, and it would set us back.
But Archibald's leadership is still under fire.
The organization is shaky right now at best.
An external investigation continues to look into complaints from 4 of Archibald's own staff of bullying and harassment. The results could prompt another attempt to bring a non-confidence vote, says this chief.
And once we get that, I think we'll put the resolution back on the floor at the December meeting.
I plead for this assembly to think one more moment about all of our children out there.
The AFN's Youth Council delivered an emotional plea. Stop the internal conflict.
For every chief who has gotten away with capturing the attention of this assembly, while our children are once again put aside to the sake of political ambitions.
But Archibald's main demand is still commanding attention, a resolution to investigate AFN's finances. The vote on that pushed to tomorrow.
There's been issues with accountability and financial management with the AFN for as long as I can remember.
If the resolution passes, it means a financial audit of the AFN's past 8 years, with particular attention to salary payouts and awarded contracts, both areas at the heart of the National Chief's allegations of corruption. That vote expected to happen as federal ministers address the Assembly. Olivia Stefanovich, CBC News, Vancouver.
Prime Minister of the UK, Boris Johnson, is coming under immense pressure to quit. In the past 24 hours, 2 key ministers and more than 30 junior ministers have left Johnson's cabinet over his leadership. But Johnson is rejecting calls to go.
Frankly, Mr. Speaker, the job of a Prime Minister in difficult circumstances when he's been handed a colossal mandate is to keep going, and that's what I'm going to do.
In the past few months, Johnson has been fined by police and blasted in an investigator's report for government parties that flouted COVID-19 restrictions. He narrowly survived a confidence vote called by his own party. 41% of the Conservative caucus voted to oust him. Most recently, he has been slammed for his handling of sexual assault allegations against a senior Conservative lawmaker. Many Canadians are enjoying what feels like the first normal summer in 2 years. But as Julia Wong tells us, with COVID-19 case counts rising in some parts of the country, there's concern we could soon see another wave of infections.
Fadi Farhad's cafe is almost like it was before the pandemic.
People feeling more comfortable to go out.
But a surge of COVID-19 could threaten that.
Make me worry, make me more careful.
Ontario and Quebec are seeing case numbers and hospitalizations inch up.
Oh yeah, we're certainly in a summer wave. It's not quite clear how big or how significant it will be, but it's certainly here.
The rise was to be expected as provinces began dropping COVID measures, allowing Canadians to enjoy things they couldn't during the pandemic.
Certainly when we remove those levels of protection, we know that we're just putting the virus at the advantage and potential increased risk for very fast spread.
On Wednesday, Nova Scotia becomes the latest province to drop isolation requirements for anyone who tests positive.
Does that mean that there are going to be some people who are at increased risk and there will be some people that die from COVID? Yes, that is a reality.
Public health officials say new variants have become dominant, but stress this wave will be different. The majority of Canadians are vaccinated, and many have immunity from previous infection.
This should not lead to a large rise in hospitalizations we'd seen even in, for example, the Omicron wave.
But years of pandemic stress and attrition have worn down the healthcare system.
Our healthcare capacity is really at a breaking point. And so we want to reduce that, any hospitalizations or increase in really sick people as much as possible.
Doctors say getting more people their third dose is vital. But unless you're older or immunocompromised, they're recommending Canadians wait until the fall to get their fourth dose. Julia Wong, CBC News, Edmonton.
A growing number of hospitals across the country are shutting their emergency departments or cutting back hours. We brought you a story about these issues in Port Alberni yesterday. Hospitals are facing staffing shortages and pandemic burnout. As Elise Von Schiel shows us, the consequences for patients are already being felt.
It's extremely scary and frustrating.
Caroline Pereira and her husband spent 15 hours watching their little girl struggle to breathe with pneumonia in a packed Calgary ER.
It was pretty distressing, and it didn't help all of the other sick kids around that their parents are feeling the same things that I was feeling, and there's just nothing we can do.
It was traumatic, but Pereira knows she was lucky to even receive care. ERs across the country are being forced to close with staff shortages, illness, and severe burnout.
I hope it doesn't come to this, but if people can't be seen in a timely fashion, some people may die. The distress that causes on an already burnt out healthcare workforce is immeasurable.
Those watching the ERs buckle say it's not just the pandemic. The healthcare system has been staving off collapse for years. The hospital in Melita, Manitoba is closing for the summer. Patients will need to drive an hour and a half for care.
If you have a system that's not working properly in the first place, it has to be fixed. And some of these small hospitals maybe have been ignored for too long.
Similar situations are playing out in Nova Scotia, Ontario, Quebec, and across Western Canada. In Clearwater, BC, staff are warning the shutdowns won't stop.
It's a huge struggle to go to work every day, knowing that you're coming into probably a workplace where we don't have enough people to provide the quality and quantity of care that we want to be able to provide.
Those working in healthcare say education, hiring, and more resources are needed, but that may not come quickly. And with no immediate relief, there's concerns about the strain another wave of COVID-19 could put on already struggling hospitals. Elise Von Schiel, CBC News, Calgary.
And given the relaxation of pandemic restrictions, people are also traveling again. As we've seen here at YVR, that is causing chaos at some airports because of staffing shortages. But as Ithil Musa reports, the problem is worse in this country than in most.
In Canada's busiest airport, more disruptions, delays, and a whole lot of displeasure.
I was supposed to come in last night, but my flight last night was canceled, so I had to go back home and then get the earliest flight I could this morning.
being a regular traveler, we understand sometimes this can happen, but this is absolutely a ridiculous situation to be in for so many people.
Summer demand coupled with staffing shortages has created a perfect storm that's rippled across the country.
What's happened is airlines no longer have the opportunity to reset themselves. Normally, what they would do after a thunderstorm, for example, is they would take the day after things get better at the airport and the weather has passed to reset themselves. Right now, they've been facing 94 straight days of really thunderstorms at Canada's airports.
It's been a particularly bad month for passengers on Air Canada and WestJet flights. They recorded the most delays among North America's biggest airlines. But according to one expert, U.S. carriers experienced some of the same issues last year, and it's now Canada's turn.
When pilots are in great demand, when crew are also in great demand. And what that means is that if there's a minor disruption on a schedule that's very finely balanced, it can tip in the favor of total chaos.
We asked Air Canada and WestJet what they're doing to address delays. Air Canada says it's cutting flights and has purchased additional ground equipment. WestJet is also reducing flights this summer and has hired more than 1,000 people. Idil Musa, CBC News, Toronto.
A summertime staple, the patio. Coming up, how a little outdoor space can go a long way if that's all you got is a balcony. And it is 6:44 p.m. There's a live look at Whistler Olympic Plaza on a beautiful night. Great night to play some ball like those folks there at the bottom of your screen. There she goes. And that beautiful green grass and those lush trees. Thanks to all that rain. Johanna will be back with your full forecast right after the break.
My name's Tremaine Clark and I've been staying in Pippi Park in my tent with my dog. I was working for an offshore company a couple years back and we were going out to do a forklift course. The driver turned left on oncoming traffic. He didn't see the SUV because it was early morning and the sun was in his eyes. And it struck me on my side. So I've been dealing with that. When I went to the gathering place, just using their services and whatnot, just trying to get on my feet. And I was there for 5 months looking for apartments and stuff. Just with the highs and lows of everybody in there, it's, you know, it was kind of difficult. Drugs, blood, needles, people smoking, drugs, like it's not a place for, right, many. As soon as I had the chance to get a tent, I was gone. There's a couple other people here, yes. Pretty much same situation, just different scenario. Why they're become homeless, but yes, there's 3 others here. I need a chance. I need a break. Like, and that's all. I just need a place to call home, really. Right? I need a routine for my dog, me. Like, you know, someone to give me a break, that's all. I don't know if they were waiting, they were following my story, I don't know, but everything happened for a reason, so here I am. I feel fantastic, it's amazing. I'm overwhelmed. There's so many people supporting me. It just feels amazing that I didn't give up, and this is where I am. My next step is try to find a part-time job or get on the go with my GED and just go from there. Sky's the limit. Like, let's do it. Right? You know what I mean?
And Johanna Wagstaffe joins us again with more on the weather. So, Joe, I got to say today, pretty ideal. Sunshine, a little cool. It's perfect.
That, yeah. A little bit of humidity as well. Never heard the beach waves.
Just makes it more volume. It's great.
Exactly. We do have some showers, though, that will break up the day that otherwise would feel very similar to today. Thursday is going to be a bit of a showery one. Take a look at the temperatures, though, across the country. We are still much cooler in BC than parts of the Yukon and the Northwest Territories. In fact, still hitting the 30s in places like Inuvik, Tuktoyaktuk, also hitting the 30-degree mark for a fourth going on fifth day in a row. We're starting to see some of that dry trend in northern BC. I know you've had your fair share of warm and dry temperatures as well. You were sort of under the influence of that same high pressure to the north. So you can see fire danger now ramping up to high, even pockets of extreme. Very different story across the south. This is where we continue to see the risk of isolated downpours along with our swollen rivers, concerns for flash flooding once again tomorrow. And of any of the days that we've seen these thunderstorms, I think tomorrow is probably highest risk, especially for the Caribou, North Thompson, even in through the Okanagan. We may get a situation like we saw a couple of days ago in Penticton, where one thunderstorm brings a lot of rain in a short amount of time. Hard to say who gets it, but definitely we'll be watching that tomorrow. 10 to 20 millimeters generally across the interior. Much less, though, for Metro Vancouver, not that 10 to 20 millimeter mark. Temperatures are going to be cool for one more day. Cool, I mean, a degree or two below seasonal, but we are going to clear out as we get high pressure moving in from the west. That is what we'll be looking forward to on the south coast as we head into the weekend. But another showery day from Prince Rupert down towards Port Hardy. Look at these temperatures in the interior as I get you through the next couple of days. We're going to be noticing our temperature spike on the south coast, not hitting the 30s though quite yet in through the interior, which is good. Once we get into this summer stretch, very quickly things will dry out and we'll go from flood concern to fire concern. So I'm happy that we're not hitting those 30s quite yet, but it is warming up nicely for us on the south coast. Back to seasonal by the time we hit Saturday, Sunday, Monday. And Leanne, I got to show this to you. 24, 25 degree forecast for early next week. This is the switch. It's summer after this.
Wow, no kidding. And then you have a little arrow at the end. It just keeps going. Is this what
Thanks
happens?
for noticing. Little infinity bar.
Wow. Excellent forecast. Thank you, Johanna.
You're welcome.
You don't need a patch of land to have a gorgeous garden. All you need is a little outdoor space, a little imagination, and the willingness to experiment. Balcony gardener Justin Keats has more on what to consider.
If you're first starting off, one of my first tips would be the bigger, the better. So the larger your pots, the more water they're going to retain. If you are balcony gardening, even if you're not facing south, I would suggest that you're going to be watering every day in some capacity. Water just dries out quicker. Certainly you want to be using container soils, so that's just going to have a greater mix of perlite and humus and other water retaining elements within the soil. For some plants that are a little bit more hardy, for instance like ferns, hostas, stuff like that, I sometimes add a little bit more of traditional earth in there as well, because they do tend to like, I find, a little bit of a heavier soil. For the sun, I find things like geraniums, gasnias, virtually anything that says it's going to do okay in full or half sun is going to work fine on your balcony. It's a lot easier to garden for the sun than it is in the shade. So for shade, I find a lot of good plants are hostas, impatiens, ferns, bleeding heart, astilbe, and coleus. Touch base with your condo association or your rental landlord. There's issues potentially based on what you're putting up or how they are anchored to the balcony. So it's just a matter of asking before you act. So over the winter, the main thing you want to do is trim them down, cover them, and place them in a space where they're still receiving as much sunlight as possible. That's helping the roots of the dormant plant just have a little bit more increase in temperature. Once you got the basics, I find it's about making that space your own. It's no different than having a backyard. And I also feel it's something that you can work with what you got. My balcony has a lot of metal railings and beams that allow me to hang things easily versus another balcony may not. It's a process. It's something that we learn over time. It's a skill set. Plants die, that's cycle life, but you're trying to learn to help things grow in the future, which is better for the environment anyways.
Could you be a multi-millionaire and not realize it? An unclaimed lotto ticket worth $15 million is still unclaimed, and the deadline is coming up. We'll tell you when that is next.
OVO is about joy, OVO is about acceptance, OVO is about empowering women as well. OVO is about everything that the society is going through in a different way, but in a more fun way that we tell the story. It's very much different than any other Cirque du Soleil shows because we incorporate insects. So it's not like about humans anymore, it's about insects, but telling problems of the society in a way that is not so harsh, you know, so.
And you are dressed as your character, the White Spider. Tell us a bit about how your character fits into the show.
So before, I think we started a little bit of sensual aspect of the spider, of the woman, but now I think we try to empower a little bit the woman now. So we try to have a strong character, a strong woman, telling the story, telling the act, performing the contortion act into that way.
And you are a contortionist. You also do hand balancing.
Yes.
What exactly are both of those things?
Well, contortion, it's basically, there's a few different types of contortions, obviously. What I do, it's towards the handstands, because it's the Mongolian traditional hand contortion. We involve strength, hand balance, and all this flexibility in a very controlled manner way of doing things.
And you've been doing this since you were just 7 years old. It's been a long time. And how did you originally get into this?
So my father and my grandfather were from the circus, so I always had a lot of influence of circus in my life. So whenever I didn't have a babysitter, I would just go to the circus and just play around. And then I saw all these contortions doing this amazing stuff. Like, that's it, that's what I'm gonna do. I want to become a contortionist. So at the age of 5, I remember that I started training. I was struggling. Obviously, it was just for fun, it was nothing serious, but then at the age of 7, I was like, no, that's it. Dad trained me over because I want to become a contortionist. He was like, oh, maybe, let's see, maybe you don't have the body type because you're a bit taller, you're just not the most flexible girl either, you're not naturally flexible, so you might struggle throughout the years. Anyway, I trained for 2 years, and then at the age of 9, I started performing professionally, and it's been natural since then. I never forced myself into it. I think it was just the passion was bigger than anything else. So I just.
And what's your favorite part about being able to perform for audiences, especially internationally on the big stage?
I think the favorite part, it is the audience itself. I think that's the most important part of my performance, because without them, I think I need their energy, I need their vibration to do a good performance. Whenever there's not many people, the crowd is a bit silent, I feel like there's something missing, but whenever they're vibrant and very warm, I feel like that's where I get my power to perform, and that's what's get us going as well as a performer.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
Join CBC Vancouver at the 15th Annual Surrey Fusion Festival, a celebration of food, music, and culture on July 23rd and 24th at Holland Park. Plus, it's free to attend. Visit surreyfusionfestival.ca for more info. And tune in to On the Coast Wednesdays for The Climate Changers, a new special series about the people who are taking action against climate change. Learn more at cbc.ca/BC.
Well, someone in Vancouver might be a millionaire and they don't even know it. An unclaimed lotto ticket worth $15 million was sold in town, and it's about to expire. Last August, a Lotto Max ticket was sold in Vancouver, but if no one claims the jackpot by the 13th of next month, the money goes back towards future draws. So check your purses, junk drawers, and beach novel bookmarks. But don't start planning your next luxury vacation just yet. The odds of winning are around 1 in 33.3 million. Is that you, Joe?
I definitely do not have the ticket. I mean, I'm the kind of person who would use it as a bookmark, but it is not me.
I have a very messy junk drawer, but I do not buy those tickets.
I was kind of hoping.
My husband, he's into these.
Yeah, let's ask all our friends, all our family. Let's just make sure.
Right. I feel like there needs to be some sort of fee owed if we're the ones that remind them.
Yes, let this be that notice right now.
Right. Everybody that's watching, if it's one of you at home, that's who it is.
Yep.
All right. All right. That's it for us today. Thank you for joining us for CBC News at 6. I'll be back here next week, and Joe will be here again tomorrow, of course, as always.
Have a good night.